My name is Myra Henderson. I'm 68 years old, and 4 months ago, my daughter tried to kill me. She didn't use a weapon. She used a family hike, a remote trail in the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix, where cell service dies 2 miles in, and the nearest ranger station is an hour's drive. My daughter and her husband shoved me and my husband off a rocky ledge 30 feet down onto volcanic rock. Then they climbed down to check the bodies. I was one of those bodies. Blood in my mouth. 2 cracked ribs, stars in my peripheral vision that had nothing to do with the sky. And my husband Glenn, the man I'd been married to for 45 years, whispered 4 words that saved us both. Lie still. Let them think the fall finished us. But the fall wasn't the worst part. What Glenn told me as I lay on those rocks, what he'd been keeping from me for 3 weeks, that was the thing that shattered everything I thought I knew about my own child and what I did with that truth. Well, that's why I'm telling you this story. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories. This is a place where mothers share the moments that tested everything, their patience, their love, and their limits. If this story speaks to you, drop a comment below and make sure you subscribe. Now let me tell you who I was before that trail. I spent 35 years as a geologist with the United States Geological Survey. I've mapped fault lines across 3 states. I can tell you the age of a rock by running my thumb across the grain. I've stood on the rim of active calderas and cataloged earthquakes from helicopter seats, but I couldn't see the fault line running through my own family. Glenn and I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, a modest ranch house on a 1/4-acre lot with a desert garden I've been nursing for 12 years, prickly pear cactus along the driveway, a hummingbird feeder on the patio that I refill every Monday morning. Nothing fancy, just ours. Glenn retired 4 years before I did. 28 years with the National Insurance Crime Bureau. He investigated insurance fraud, the kind where people burn down restaurants, fake car accidents, or stage burglaries that never happened. He spent 3 decades catching liars who thought paper trails couldn't talk. Turns out the last case of his career would be sitting across from him at Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't know that yet. Not on the morning I packed my hiking boots and filled my father's old aluminum canteen and climbed into the back of my son-in-law's SUV. That morning, I was just a retired woman who missed her daughter and wanted to believe a family hike could fix what years of silence had broken. I spent my life reading rocks. Glenn spent his reading people. Between the 2 of us, you'd think we would have noticed sooner. We didn't. Glenn and I met in 1981. He was investigating a fraudulent mining claim near Prescott. I was the USGS expert witness called in to prove the ore samples had been salted. He asked me about stratigraphy. I asked him about fraud statutes. We got married 11 months later, 45 years. That's what we had when they pushed us off that ledge. In those 45 years, we raised 1 daughter, built a life that fit us like a well-worn pair of boots. Glenn's bad knee kept him off trails by 65, but he still gardened. Still made coffee every morning at 5:15. Still left a mug on my nightstand with exactly the amount of cream I liked, a quarter and no more. We weren't wealthy. We weren't poor. We had the house, 2 vehicles paid off, a pension each, and enough savings that neither of us lay awake at night doing math. Comfortable. That's the word. We were comfortable. And then there was Jolene. Our weekly phone calls used to last an hour, then 30 minutes, then 15, then they stopped being weekly. I'd call her. She'd text back, "Busy, Mom, call you Sunday." Sunday would come and go. I told myself she was building her own life. That distance was normal, that a 38-year-old woman didn't need to check in with her mother every week. My father was a park ranger in the Tonto National Forest for 31 years. When he died, he left me 2 things. The first was his aluminum canteen dented, scratched with a story in every mark. The second was a piece of advice I've carried longer than I've carried any rock. The desert doesn't forgive carelessness. Myra, and neither does family. Glenn used to say, "I married the wrong rock." He meant himself. I told him he was exactly the right kind, steady, dependable, and impossible to move once he'd made up his mind. Jolene married Derek Pratt 7 years ago. She was 31. He was 34. He'd been her financial advisor for 6 months before he became her boyfriend, which should have been my first red flag. It wasn't. Derek was the kind of man who shakes your hand for 2 seconds too long and looks past your shoulder for someone more important. Tall, clean-shaven polo shirts in colors that cost more than my weekly groceries. He smiled constantly, the way a salesman smiles like it was part of the uniform. At their engagement dinner, he mentioned his family had money. Past tense. Glenn caught it. I didn't. Jolene changed after the wedding. Not overnight. Slowly, like sandstone eroding. You don't notice until the cliff face looks different, and you can't remember when it shifted. She used to bring wildflowers when she visited. Then she started bringing questions. Mom, have you and Dad thought about long-term care insurance? Mom, what happens to the house if something happens to both of you? Mom, is your trust up to date? I thought she was being responsible. Glenn thought she was being coached. At a backyard barbecue 2 summers ago, Derek asked Glenn about our life insurance casually between bites of potato salad. You guys have policies, right? Just in case. Everyone should. Glenn said we had small policies through our former employers. Nothing significant. Derek nodded. Change the subject. Glenn told me later. That wasn't small talk, Myra. That was research. I told him he was being paranoid. 28 years investigating fraud can make anyone suspicious. My daughter used to call me every Sunday at 7, then every other Sunday. Then the first of the month, then only when she needed something. I should have asked why. Instead, I made excuses. That's what mothers do. We build bridges out of excuses until the canyon is too wide to cross. 3 months before the hike, Jolene called on a Tuesday. Not Sunday. Tuesday. She never called on Tuesdays. Mom, I've been thinking, you and Dad should really update your estate documents just in case. Her voice had that practiced warmth. The kind you hear from receptionists at dental offices, polished empty. I told her everything was in order. Glenn and I had a revocable trust. She was the sole beneficiary. She knew this. But is there anything else? Any separate policies or accounts Dad hasn't mentioned? Glenn was on the patio reading. He couldn't hear the conversation, but I told him about it that night. He set down his book and looked at me over his reading glasses. She asked about separate policies. She's just being thorough, Glenn. She's being coached. 2 weeks later, dinner at their house in Phoenix. Derek grilled steaks. Jolene made her grandmother's cornbread. Normal, warm, almost convincing. After dinner, Jolene followed me to the kitchen. Mom, I noticed you left the stove on last time you visited. The burner was on for an hour after you left. I hadn't left the stove on. I knew that the way I know quartz from feldspar by instinct built over decades, but I said nothing. Later, when I went to the restroom, I passed the hallway and heard Jolene talking to Glenn. Her voice was low, gentle, concerned. Dad, Mom's getting confused again. Have you noticed? Glenn's answer was silence. The kind of silence that means a man is filing something away for later. At that same dinner, Candace Pratt Derek's mother was on the phone in the guest bedroom. The door was open 6 inches. I heard her say Glenn's wife. Oh, she was some kind of rock scientist. Sweet woman. But a little eccentric. I worry about her honestly. She didn't know I was standing in the hallway. She didn't know I'd been called eccentric by better women than her and survived every time. The hike was Jolene's idea. She called on a Sunday, the first Sunday call in 2 months. Mom, I want to do something special for your and Dad's 45th anniversary. Remember the Superstition Mountains? You always said they were your favorite. Let's hike the Peralta Trail, the 4 of us. Like a family again. My throat tightened. Not from suspicion, from longing. My daughter wanted to spend a day with me in the mountains I'd studied for 20 years. That was all I heard. Glenn was less moved. It's a 3-hour trail with a 12,200-foot elevation gain. My knee hasn't been right since February. Derek called Glenn directly. That was unusual. Glenn, we'll go slow. Pack light. It's about being together, not breaking records. Being together. Those words did something to me I'm embarrassed to admit. They made me hope. At 68, hope feels different. Sharper, more fragile. You hold it the way you hold a bird. Too tight and you crush it. Too loose and it flies. I said yes. Glenn said yes too. But that week he made 3 phone calls from his study. Closed the door each time. I heard him say, Southwestern Mutual once through the wall. I didn't ask. I should have. On the night before the hike, Glenn sat on the edge of our bed. He was quiet for a long time. Then something's off, Myra. I can't put my finger on it yet, but something's off with this trip. You're always suspicious. I was paid to be suspicious for 28 years. You're retired now. The instinct doesn't retire. He looked at me. Just stay close to me on the trail. Okay, I promised. I thought he was being overprotective. He was being precise. October 14th. We started at 6:30 in the morning, already 78 degrees. By noon, it would hit 92. The Superstition Mountains are volcanic tuff and rhyolite. 30 million years of eruptions compressed into towers and ridges that look like the earth tried to build a cathedral and gave up halfway. I've mapped these rocks. I've cataloged their fractures. I know where they hold and where they crumble. Derek drove. Jolene sat up front. Glenn and I in the back like teenagers on a double date that neither of us had agreed to. At the trailhead, I laced up my hiking boots, Merrill's 12 years old. The soles worn smooth in the heel, but still gripping hard at the toe. Jolene looked down at them and laughed. Mom, those boots are older than my marriage and more reliable, I said. Nobody laughed. I wasn't trying to be funny. The trail climbed through Cholla and Palo Verde. The air smelled like creosote bush after the overnight rain. That wet desert scent like the earth exhaling after holding its breath all summer. I filled my lungs with it. I've loved that smell since I was 9 years old. Hiking with my father in the Tonto. A mile in, Derek suggested a side trail, narrower, less maintained. There's a better viewpoint up here. I found it on all trails. I looked at the rock. Looser here. Weathered, tough, crumbling at the edges. The drop to the right was significant, maybe 40 feet of unprotected slope before it hit a shelf of basalt. I almost said something. Glenn squeezed my hand. There was something in his grip. Urgency or warning or both. When I wasn't looking, he slipped something into the side pocket of my backpack. I didn't notice until later. Much later. Derek kept checking behind us, not for other hikers for witnesses. We reached the overlook at 9:15. The valley stretched below us. Raw, open red-orange stone under a sky so blue it hurt. No other hikers in sight. No voices, just the wind moving through brittle bush and the distant call of a red-tailed hawk. Family photo, Derek said, right at the edge, the light's perfect. Jolene pulled out her phone. Mom. Dad, stand right there, backs to the valley. I stepped toward the edge. Glenn positioned himself beside me, slightly behind. I noticed he'd shifted his weight forward onto the balls of his feet. At the time, I thought it was his knee. Closer to the edge, Derek said. The angle's better. We took one step back, too. I saw the look. Jolene and Derek eyes meeting over the phone screen. Not a glance a signal. The kind married couples develop. A language without words that says now. Derek moved fast, both hands on Glenn's back, a hard, graceless shove. Jolene pushed me, not with her full strength. With her palms flat against my shoulders, the way a child pushes open a heavy door, mechanical, committed, I went over 30 feet of volcanic rock. I know the exact distance because I've measured drops like this my entire career. I just never thought I'd be the one falling. My geologist brain did something strange. It took over. Mid-fall. I twisted my body toward the slope, away from the vertical drop, aimed for the scrub brush, aimed for the angled shelf of weathered tuff that I knew even in free fall would slow me down before the basalt below. Impact. My ribs hit first, then my hip, then my shoulder. I rolled twice before stopping against a creosote bush. My father's canteen flew off my pack, hit, a rock bounced. Water sprayed across the stone like a small, useless fountain. 8 feet to my left, Glenn lay face down. Blood on his scalp. His right arm was tucked under his body. He wasn't moving. Above us, Derek's voice cold practical. Check the bodies, Jolene's whisper. Are they... Did it just check? Then we go to the ranger station. We found them like this, footsteps, scrambling down a safer route to a shelf 15 feet above us, 2 faces peering down. I kept my eyes closed, held my breath, played dead. They looked for maybe 90 seconds. Then, Derek, we need to move now. Footsteps retreating car doors. An engine starting in the parking lot below. Gone. Silence. Not peaceful silence. The kind that fills the space after something terrible, where even the wind pauses to decide if it should keep going. I could hear my own heartbeat, fast, irregular, the kind of rhythm a cardiologist would frown at. I could hear a lizard moving across rock 3 feet from my head. I could hear the last of my canteen water dripping onto stone. The creosote surrounded me. That same desert smell, rain-soaked earth. Medicinal resin, something green and alive in a place made of death. My blood mixed with it. Iron and creosote. Not a combination I'd ever cataloged. Then Glenn lies still. A whisper so quiet it could have been wind. Let them think the fall finished us. He was alive. His voice was strained rough with pain, but present. I kept my eyes closed. My ribs screamed with every breath, so I breathed shallow. Sips of air, not gulps. My left ankle throbbed. Something warm and wet ran down my right arm. Blood, I assumed. I didn't look. Why did she? I started. Not yet. Wait until they're gone. We lay still. 20 minutes. I counted heartbeats because counting was something I could control. 1,197 heartbeats, each one a small argument between my body, which wanted to scream, and my brain, which said, not yet. At minute 17, the engine started below. At minute 19, tires on gravel. At minute 20, nothing. Glenn sat up first. Slowly, a groan he couldn't suppress. His right wrist was angled wrong. Broken. The gash on his scalp was 3 inches long, blood matting his white hair against his forehead, but his eyes were clear. They're gone, he said. I know. I need to tell you something, Myra. I should have told you 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. He'd known for 3 weeks and he'd said nothing. Tell me. Glenn leaned against the rock face, pressed his good hand against the gash on his scalp, winced. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from Dave Kubak. Dave and I worked together at the Bureau for 15 years. He retired 2 years after me, but he still does part-time claims review for Southwestern Mutual. I stared at him. My ribs achy, my ankle throbbed. Blood dried on my arms in thin brown lines, and my husband was talking about his old colleague. Dave flagged something, a new life insurance policy. Southwestern Mutual policy number, SWM-2026-4 47189 2 $2 million. Total, $1 million on you. $1 million on me. The desert went quiet. Even the hawk stopped calling beneficiary Jolene M. Pratt. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. The policy was purchased 4 months ago. The application included signatures from both of us, yours and mine. I never signed that application. He looked at me, and I know you didn't either. 4 months. They'd been planning this for 4 months. The phone calls about our estate. The questions about separate policies. The stove I never left on the gentle suggestions that my memory was slipping all of its scaffolding for this moment for a fall on a remote trail that no one would question. My daughter bought a life insurance policy on our lives. Not just bought it, forged our signatures, had the medical exam waived by checking a box that said we'd had physicals within 6 months. We hadn't. I lay on volcanic rock 30 million years old. I'd studied these formations my entire career. I'd mapped earthquakes that rearranged entire coastlines. None of them shook me like those words. My daughter didn't push me in a moment of rage. She pushed me in the 4th month of a plan. Glenn kept talking. The way investigators talk when they're presenting evidence factual measured, leaving no room for ambiguity. Dave sent me copies of the application. I verified the forged signatures myself. Your capital M has 2 peaks, Myra. The one on the application has 3. My G doesn't loop. The forged one does. Who processed it? An agent named Kyle Fenton. He went to Arizona State with Derek Fraternity Brothers. Derek paid him $4,200 across 3 Venmo transactions to bypass the in-person signature requirement. $4,200. That's what my life was worth in processing fees. I didn't tell you because I needed you to act normal around Jolene. If she suspected we knew she'd cancel the policy and destroy the paper trail. I needed time to verify everything through Dave's contacts. I needed the evidence to be airtight before I told you, before I told anyone. 3 weeks. My voice was flat. You knew for 3 weeks that our daughter was planning to kill us, and you brought me on this hike anyway. He was quiet for a moment. I thought it was next month. Their original searches mentioned a trail near Flagstaff. I thought this trip was reconnaissance. I was wrong. What searches I'll explain later. Right now, there's something else. He told me about the phone call. Dave, during his review, pulled the customer service recording standard procedure. On one of those recordings, Jolene had called Southwestern Mutual to ask about claim timelines. During that call, she'd said something to Derek, not realizing the line was still recording. They're old. A few more years is just nursing home money. I went quiet, not angry quiet, something deeper, colder. The kind of silence that happens in the seconds before a rock slide when the mountain has already decided to move but hasn't started yet. That's what she said about us. That's what she said about you. My daughter said that about me. We needed to move. 2 miles to the trailhead. Glenn's broken wrist was swelling against his watch band. My ribs made every breath a negotiation, shallow enough to avoid the stabbing, deep enough to keep me conscious. I'm a geologist. Rocks are what I know. So, I read the terrain the way I've read it for 35 years. Water follows the lowest path. Drainage washes cut through this landscape like veins all running downhill toward the roads. I found one, a dry wash 20 inches wide with stable rhyolite walls on both sides. Follow the wash, I told Glenn. It'll take us to the parking lot. He nodded. Didn't argue. He'd learned 45 years ago that when I talk about rocks, I'm not guessing. My father's canteen was dented now. A new mark on a surface already covered in old ones. I picked it up, shook it. Maybe a cup of water left inside enough for 2 small sips each. I handed it to Glenn first. He drank, handed it back. Those ancient boots, the ones Jolene had laughed about, gripped every rock I stepped on. The worn heel didn't slip. The old rubber held. 12 years of trails had trained those soles to this particular stone. My daughter called them relics. They saved my ankles on every step of that crawl. 2 miles. On a normal morning, 40 minutes. That morning, 3 hours, 11 rests. One prayer I didn't know I had in me. We reached the trailhead at 12:30. The parking lot was empty except for a silver pickup truck. A silver pickup truck belonged to Ruth Nakamura, my neighbor from 3 doors down, and her hiking partner from Tempe. Ruth was a nurse practitioner. She saw the blood on Glenn's face and dropped her water bottle. She looked at us, looked at the trail behind us, and called 911 before asking a single question. Some people see blood and freeze. Ruth saw blood and moved. I've been grateful for that difference every day since. Banner Desert Medical Center. Room 412. White walls, fluorescent lights with a faint hum that Glenn said sounded like a bad deposition. My injuries, 2 fractured ribs, grade 2 ankle sprain, 17 stitches across my arms and back. Glenn fractured right wrist, 8 staples in his scalp, mild concussion. The ER doctor, a young woman named Dr. Patel, looked at our x-rays and said, "You're incredibly lucky. Most falls from that height on that terrain." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Jolene and Derek arrived 2 hours after we were admitted. Jolene was crying. She came through the door of my room with red eyes and shaking hands and a bouquet of sunflowers from the grocery store. "Oh my God, Mom." Dad. We called 911 as soon as we got signal. We were so scared. The rocks just gave way. Derek stood behind her hands in his pockets. We ran to the ranger station. They told us someone already called it in. Ruth had called it in. 40 minutes before Jolene dialed anything, Jolene sat beside my bed, took my hand, squeezed it. "I thought I lost you, Mom." I looked at my daughter's face. I searched for guilt the way I search for fault lines. Systematically tracing every surface for fractures beneath the exterior. I found performance-rehearsed grief-manufactured panic. Every tear calibrated, she held my hand and cried. Real tears, technically, but tears can be real and still be props. I counted them. 3 on her left cheek, 2 on her right. Not one of them was for me. The police came for a statement. A young officer with a notepad and kind eyes. Glenn looked at me. I looked at Glenn. We slipped, I said. The rocks were loose, not yet. You know that feeling when someone you love is standing right next to you, but they've already left? When the hug is a script and the tears are a prop, when the person holding your hand is the same person who just tried to break every bone in your body. If you've ever had to pretend you didn't see what you saw for your own survival, you know exactly where I was in that hospital bed lying still again. The way Glenn told me to lie still on those rocks, except this time I was lying still in a conversation instead of on a mountainside. If this story is already hitting close, drop a comment below and make sure you subscribe. Because what happened over the next 6 weeks, I'm still not sure I believe it myself. 4 days in that hospital bed. 4 days of lying still while Jolene visited and performed and left. 4 days to decide what kind of mother I was going to be next. I was discharged on day 4. Glenn on day 6. His concussion needed monitoring. The nurses liked him. He told them about insurance fraud cases from the 90s, and they gathered around his bed like it was story hour. We came home to Scottsdale. Everything looked the same. The prickly pear in the driveway, the hummingbird feeder, the coffee maker Glenn had programmed before we left for the hike still blinking ready. I sat on the patio with my morning coffee, watched the hummingbirds. The same ritual I'd done for 12 years. But the coffee tasted different. The hummingbirds moved differently, not because they'd changed because I had. Glenn came out through the sliding door. He was holding a manila folder tan thick, the kind that government offices use for documents they want to keep together. He sat down across from me, set the folder on the table between our coffee mugs. "It's time," he said. He opened the folder. Page 1. Southwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company application for term life coverage. Applicant, Jolene M. Pratt. Page 3. Insured individual primary Myra L. Henderson. Date of birth, March 8, 1958. Coverage amount $1 million. Insured individual secondary Glenn T. Henderson. Date of birth, November 2, 1956. Coverage amount $1 million. Page 7 signatures. I stared at my own name written by someone who wasn't me. The capital M was close. Good even. But I write my M with 2 peaks. Always have since 3rd grade when Mrs. Kavanaugh made us practice cursive on lined paper until our fingers cramped. 2 peaks. This one had 3. Glenn's G was wrong too. His doesn't loop at the bottom. The forged one looped twice like a child's drawing of a spiral. Dave pulled the original scanned copy from their system. Glenn said the agent who processed this is named Kyle Fenton. He was Derek's roommate at Arizona State Fraternity Brothers, Pi Alpha Alpha. Kyle waived the in-person signature requirement, which is a direct violation of state insurance regulations. He laid out 3 more sheets. Venmo transaction records. Derek Pratt to Kyle Fenton. 3 payments, $1,400 on June 12th. $1,400 on June 28th, $1,400 on July 15th. Total $4,200. That's the forgery fee, Glenn said. I held the policy in both hands. 5 pages, standard paper, standard print. Nothing special about it except that it was a plan to turn my death into a direct deposit. I've held million-year-old fossils in my hands. Trilobites from the Cambrian, ammonites from the Cretaceous, petrified wood from the Triassic. None of them felt as heavy as that piece of paper. "What do we do?" I asked. Glenn folded his hands. The cast on his right wrist clicked against the table. "We do what I did for 28 years. We build a case and we build it right." Glenn walked me through his 3 weeks. After Dave's initial call, Glenn contacted 2 more former colleagues. One was a claims adjuster at Allied Pacific. The other was a retired fraud examiner who now taught at the University of Arizona. Both confirmed independently. The Southwestern Mutual policy had red flags that should have triggered an automatic review. Kyle Fenton had overridden every checkpoint. Glenn had also obtained Derek's credit report through a legal public records request. The numbers were specific. $340,000 in cryptocurrency losses. A platform called NovaCoin that collapsed 8 months earlier. 3 maxed credit cards totaling $62,000. A personal loan from Candace Pratt for $45,000 already spent. Monthly expenses exceeding income by $4,100. Then the browsing history. During a visit to Jolene and Derek's house in Phoenix, Jolene had left Glenn alone in the living room for 10 minutes while she ran to the pharmacy. Their shared desktop was open. Glenn checked the browser history. It's what he did for a living. Some habits don't expire. The search is life insurance payout timeline. How long after policy purchase can you file a claim? Contestability period life insurance. Hiking accident statistics. Arizona. Most dangerous trails. Superstition Mountains. Cell service coverage. Peralta Trail. That last one. Cell service coverage was searched 14 times. 14. My son-in-law researched how to kill me the way I used to research rock formations thoroughly. The contestability period is 2 years. Glenn said they bought the policy 4 months ago. They weren't going to wait. They wanted it done before the first anniversary review, when insurers do deeper verification. The anniversary hike, our 45th remote trail bad cell service, a wife who studied those exact mountains, an accident that everyone would believe. This wasn't impulsive, Myra. This was a project. 2 weeks after the hospital, Jolene came to the house with a casserole dish and a card. The card was cream-colored with gold script. Inside, in Jolene's handwriting, "With all my love, so grateful you're here." She brought photographs from the hike taken before the push. The 4 of us at the trail, heads squinting into the morning sun. Glenn and me on the trail, my boots on the rocks, the canteen clipped to my pack. Normal happy. Evidence of a family that existed for exactly 90 minutes before it didn't. Look how happy we were, Mom. Jolene held up the photo. We need more days like that. I looked at the photo. I saw a woman planning to kill her mother smiling for the camera. I said nothing. That week, Jolene posted on Facebook a photo of sunflowers, the same ones from the hospital. Caption: So grateful my parents survived their hiking accident. Life is precious. Hold your loved ones close. Hug your mom today. 847 likes. 132 comments. Your parents are so lucky to have a daughter like you. Jolene, you're such a good girl. This made me cry. 847 people liked her post. Not one of them knew she'd pushed me off a cliff 3 days before she wrote it. When I mentioned wanting to go back to the trail to see where we fell, to study the geology, to understand the slope angle, Jolene put her hand on mine. Mom, you're getting confused again. The doctor said, rest, not hiking. I watched her. Every gesture studied. Every pause timed, every tear scheduled. I used to wonder where my daughter went. The girl who picked wildflowers in the backyard and brought them to me in a juice glass. Standing in my kitchen watching her lie with the ease of breathing, I understood. That girl never left. She just learned better scripts. Candace Pratt arrived at my house the following Tuesday, uninvited, unannounced, in a white Lexus that she parked diagonally across our driveway like she owned the street. She brought banana bread. She brought judgment. Myra, darling, I heard about your terrible accident. She settled into my living room like it was a waiting room, and she was next. You know, at your age, perhaps it's time to consider whether outdoor activities are still appropriate. I offered her coffee. She declined. She wasn't here for coffee. Derek told me the trail conditions were dreadful. Just dreadful. You and Glenn are lucky to be alive. She paused. Have you considered selling this house? A single-story condo, maybe one of those assisted living communities with activities, might be safer. I'd known Candace for 7 years. In those 7 years, she'd visited my home exactly 4 times. Each visit lasted under an hour. She never ate my food. She never complimented my garden. She once looked at my bookshelf and said, "Do people still read geology textbooks for fun?" But her campaign went beyond my living room. Ruth told me she called me last Tuesday. Ruth said over coffee that Thursday, asked if I'd noticed you being forgetful, said she's worried about you and Glenn, said maybe someone should look into guardianship options. Ruth's response, I told her the only thing you forget is how to stop working. Then I hung up. Candace had also called 3 women from the Scottsdale Community Center. Same script, gentle concern. Myra's memory isn't what it used to be. Glenn's too loyal to say it, but someone should. Near sympathy moment. On her way out, Candace paused at the door quietly, almost to herself. I know Derek has struggles. I just want my boy to be okay. You understand that, don't you? As a mother, I understood. I understood that her love for Derek had the same blind spot my love for Jolene once had. The difference was, I was willing to open my eyes. Candace looked at me the way you look at furniture you're planning to replace. The last piece. While Glenn built the legal case with his contacts, I did what any scientist does. I gathered data. I checked our home computer. Glenn and I shared it, but I keep my email logged in permanently because I still get USGS newsletters and journal updates. When I opened the browser, I noticed something. My email had been accessed from a Phoenix IP address 3 times in September before the hike. Jolene, she'd logged in from their home computer. I'd told her my password 2 years ago when she needed to forward me a family photo and I couldn't find my phone. She never logged out. She'd forwarded herself my bank statements, our trust documents, my medical records from a routine checkup in August. She'd downloaded the deed to our house and a PDF of our investment portfolio summary. My daughter didn't just plan a murder. She planned an entire afterlife. Inherit the estate claim. The insurance used the guardianship narrative as backup if the accident didn't work. The system, the throw us the patience of it. That was what destroyed me. Not the push, the planning. I went to my garden. I sat in the dirt between the prickly pear and the sage bush, and I cried. Not the controlled, quiet crying of a woman maintaining composure. The ugly kind. The kind that makes your ribs hurt twice as much and your nose run and your hands shake. 40 minutes. I cried for 40 minutes. Then I wiped my face with the back of my hand, stood up, turned on the hose, watered the tomatoes, filled the hummingbird feeder, washed my hands in the kitchen sink, and picked up the phone. I'd like to speak with someone in your insurance fraud division. My name is Myra Henderson. My address is 4417 East Cactus Run Drive, Scottsdale, Arizona, and I have documents. Grief has an expiration date when there's work to do. The Maricopa County District Attorney's Office is on West Jefferson Street in downtown Phoenix. Gray carpet fluorescent lights, an American flag in the corner that needed ironing. Not glamorous functional, the kind of place where facts matter more than feelings. We met investigator Margaret Solis on a Wednesday morning. She was 48, dark hair, pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, a legal pad in front of her that already had notes on it. She'd reviewed Glenn's preliminary evidence packet before we walked in. Glenn laid everything out. The insurance policy, the forged signatures, Kyle Fenton's Venmo payments, Derek's credit report, the browser search history, the customer service recording transcript. Margaret looked through each document, turned pages, slowly made no facial expression for 9 minutes. Then she took off her glasses and looked at Glenn. Mr. Henderson, in my 12 years doing insurance fraud investigations, I've seen maybe 3 cases this well documented, and none of those were assembled by a 70-year-old man with a broken wrist. Glenn, 28 years of practice. She explained the charges. Insurance fraud with forged signatures was a Class 2 felony in Arizona up to 12 years. If they could prove the hiking incident was connected to the policy, attempted murder Class 2 dangerous offense up to 21 years. The challenge, Margaret said, is connecting the push to the policy. Right now, your initial police statement says you slipped. You'll need to amend that and we'll need more. We need them to say something, do something that ties the policy to the fall. Glenn looked at me. I looked at Glenn. We'd been married long enough to have entire conversations without speaking. Give us Thanksgiving, Glenn said. Margaret frowned. What about Thanksgiving? I leaned forward. We've hosted Thanksgiving at our house for 32 years. Jolene will be there, Derek will be there, and I'll give you what you need. Margaret studied us. 2 banged-up retirees asking for permission to set a trap at a holiday dinner. She said yes. 6 weeks. That's how long we had between Margaret's office and the 4th Thursday in November. Glenn worked the case like it was his job again because it was maybe the most important one. The handwriting expert, Dr. Linda Vasquez, forensic document examiner with 22 years of courtroom testimony, confirmed what Glenn already knew. The signatures on the Southwestern Mutual application were not written by Myra or Glenn Henderson. Probability of forgery 97.8%. Kyle Fenton cracked in 2 hours. 2 investigators from Margaret's team sat across from him in a conference room at his insurance office in Tempe. He asked for a lawyer within 15 minutes. The lawyer heard the evidence and advised Kyle to cooperate. Full cooperation agreement signed by 400 p.m. Kyle's statement notarized. Derek Pratt approached him in May, asked if he could process a life insurance application with pre-signed forms. Kyle hesitated. Derek offered $2,000. Kyle hesitated more. Derek raised it to $4,200. Kyle stopped hesitating. Kyle also confirmed. Derek told him the policy was a surprise gift for his in-laws. He said they didn't like paperwork. Kyle knew that was a lie. He processed it anyway because $4,200 was 2 months of his car payment. Phone records came next. 47 calls between Derek and Kyle in the 3 months before the policy was filed. That's roughly 1 call every 2 days. Most lasted under 4 minutes. Transaction calls, coordination calls, how to commit a felony calls. Jolene's recorded phone call was pulled from Southwestern Mutual's customer service archives. The full transcript was 23 pages. The line that mattered was on page 11. They're old. A few more years is just nursing home money. 47 calls. That's how many times my son-in-law called his college roommate to arrange my murder by paperwork. Margaret's team filled in what Glenn hadn't been able to access alone. Derek was fired from Prescott Financial Advisory 2 years ago. Official reason: misallocation of client funds. Translation: he moved client money into high-risk investments without authorization, lost a significant portion, and the firm settled quietly rather than face the publicity of a formal complaint. No prosecution, no public record, just a clean exit and a severance check that lasted 4 months. After the firing, Derek convinced Jolene to let him invest their combined savings $280,000 into a cryptocurrency fund called NovaCoin. The fund collapsed 8 months later, every dollar gone. Not reduced gone. He took a personal loan from Candace, $45,000, told her it was for a business opportunity, spent it in 4 months on credit card minimums, the second mortgage payment on their Phoenix house, and according to the bank records, $11,000 at a resort in Cabo San Lucas, a vacation Jolene posted about on Instagram with the caption, "Sometimes you just need to reset." Reset with his mother's retirement money. Bien, while his wife's parents sat 45 minutes away, not yet knowing they were line items in a spreadsheet labeled solutions. Total debt at the time of the hike, $340,000. Monthly shortfall, $4,100 months until default approximately 3. His math was simple. $2 million in insurance payouts minus $340,000 in debt equaled $1.66 million in fresh air. That's what Glenn and I were worth to Derek Pratt, the difference between his debt and his freedom. I've seen pressure turn coal into diamonds. I've also seen it turn limestone into dust. Derek was never coal. He was never going to be a diamond. He was just debt wearing a polo shirt. I need to tell you about the school play because if I don't, you'll think my daughter was born wrong. She wasn't. She was made and I helped make her. Jolene was 12 7th grade cast as Dorothy in the school production of The Wizard of Oz. She practiced her lines every night for 6 weeks. Sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow in the shower until Glenn threatened to disconnect the hot water heater. I promised to be there front row camera ready. 2 days before the show, the USGS called a major landslide in southeast Alaska the Kushtaka Slide. 300,000 cubic yards of debris threatening a village of 41 families. They needed a geologist on site within 18 hours to assess the terrain stability and advise the evacuation team. I went. I chose duty. I told myself Jolene would understand. 11 families were about to lose everything. My daughter was losing a seat in the audience. Glenn went to the play, recorded it on a camcorder. In the video, you can see Jolene as Dorothy, standing in her gingham dress and ruby slippers looking out at the audience during Somewhere Over the Rainbow. She scans the faces looking for mine. The camera wobbles. Glenn was holding it one-handed, waving with the other, trying to be enough. He wasn't. I wasn't there. And Jolene looked at that camera once with an expression I've studied in the video more times than I've studied any rock formation. It's the face of a child who just learned that love and presence aren't the same thing. I saved 11 families that week in Alaska, and I lost one of my own. Jolene never said, "I hate you for leaving." She said something worse. She said nothing. For 26 years, that silence calcified into something hard enough to build a plan on. I can't rewrite Alaska. I was the mother who wasn't there. But missing a school play is a mistake. Buying a life insurance policy on your mother and pushing her off a cliff, that's a decision. One is forgivable. The other is a crime. I want to ask you something. Have you ever sat across from someone at dinner? Someone who smiles and passes the bread and says, "Love you, Mom," and known with absolute certainty that they're lying, not guessing, knowing because you have the paperwork. If you've ever held your tongue when every nerve in your body was screaming to speak, then you know what those 6 weeks felt like. 6 weeks of Sunday phone calls where Jolene asked about my ribs and I said healing. 6 weeks of Derek texting Glenn, "How's the wrist?" and Glenn texting back a thumbs up emoji that felt like biting through leather. Stay with me. We're almost at Thanksgiving, and trust me, you'll want to be at that table. The final piece arrived on a Tuesday. Kyle Fenton's full written statement, notarized and witnessed, 27 pages. Every step detailed Derek's initial request, the payments, the forged signatures, the waived medical exam, the bypassed verification protocols. Kyle's lawyer had reviewed every word. It was clean airtight, the kind of document that ends careers and starts sentences. Margaret called, "We have enough for the warrants. We're ready when you are." Glenn and I sat on the patio that evening. The sky was turning purple over the McDowell Mountains. A coyote called somewhere in the wash behind our house. Glenn held his coffee with his good hand. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Thanksgiving with everyone there? You could just let Margaret arrest them at their house." "They tried to kill us in public, Glenn, on a trail in the daylight in front of God and the Superstition Mountains." I stood up, went inside, put the manila folder in a brown grocery bag, placed it on the sideboard near the front door next to the cranberry sauce I'd already made. Some things you serve cold. Thanksgiving morning, 500 a.m. Turkey in the oven. Glenn peeling sweet potatoes with one hand. The cast had come off 2 weeks earlier, but his grip was still weak. The kitchen smelled like sage and brown butter and something I couldn't name. Maybe finality. I set the table for 12 good china that my mother had given us. The crystal water glasses we only use twice a year. Cloth napkins and copper rings. I placed each setting carefully, deliberately, the way you arrange evidence on a table. Everything visible. Everything in its proper position. I wore my hiking boots, the old Merrills, under the dining table. No one would see them, but I would feel them, and I needed to feel something solid under my feet. Guests arrived, starting at 11 o'clock. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Howard Glenn's sister and her husband, married 38 years, both retired teachers from Mesa. Cousin Ben, 32, a paramedic who talked too fast and laughed too loud. Ruth came at 11:30 with a peon pie and a look that said she knew something was different today. I'd told Ruth, not everything just enough. Something's going to happen at dinner. Stay close to me. Ruth, should I bring anything besides pie? Just yourself. At 11:45, a gray sedan parked on the street 4 houses down. Margaret Solis and 2 plainclothes investigators. A recording device had been placed in the dining room the previous evening, a small unit behind the sideboard near the cranberry sauce. Legal. Arizona is a one-party consent state. I was the consenting party. Jolene and Derek arrived at noon. She brought pumpkin pie. He brought a bottle of wine, a $50 Cabernet that we both knew was purchased on a credit card that was $62,000 past its limit. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom. Jolene hugged me. I hugged back, counted to 3, let go. Candace arrived 10 minutes later. Jolene had invited her. I hope you don't mind, Mom. Candace didn't have anywhere to go. Everyone is welcome at my table, I said. I meant it. Dinner. Turkey carved and served. Gravy passed, rolls split, and buttered the sounds of silverware on china and wine being poured, and 12 people pretending that everything was normal. Aunt Patricia asked about the hiking accident. She'd seen Jolene's Facebook post. That must have been so frightening. Thank God you're both okay. Jolene leaned forward. Ready. This was her stage. It was the scariest moment of my life. The rocks just crumbled under their feet. I screamed. I couldn't reach them. Derek tried to climb down, but the terrain was too unstable. Derek nodded. We ran to the ranger station as soon as we could. The trail has no cell service. It was chaos. Glenn ate his turkey. I ate mine. We said nothing. 2 people at a Thanksgiving table eating a meal their daughter and son-in-law had tried to make their last. Candace from the far end. Myra. Dear, have you considered selling this house? A single-story condo might be safer for you at this stage. Derek, Mom has a point. You should think about the future. Jolene. We just worry about you both. After the accident, I haven't been sleeping. I just keep thinking, what if I set down my fork, took a sip of water, set the glass on the table? The crystal made a small, clear sound against the wood, the kind of sound that in a quiet room makes everyone look up. Actually, I said there's something I'd like to share with everyone before dessert. The table quieted. Jolene tilted her head, a half smile. Of course, Mom. What is it? I stood, walked to the sideboard, picked up the brown grocery bag. Glenn and I want to talk about what really happened on that trail in October. Jolene's smile held, but her hand gripping the fork. Her knuckles went white. Derek's jaw tightened by 1 millimeter. I noticed because I've spent 35 years studying things that fracture under pressure. I stood at the head of the table, my table in my house in the dining room where I'd served 32 Thanksgiving dinners to people. I loved my voice was level, calm, the voice I'd used in 100 USGS briefings where the data was the authority and I was just the one reading it aloud. On October 14th, Glenn and I didn't slip on that trail. We were pushed. Patricia's fork stopped midway to her mouth. Howard set his glass down so carefully you could hear the silence that replaced the clink. Ben leaned back in his chair. Glenn and I were pushed off a 30-foot ledge on the Peralta Trail by our daughter and her husband, Jolene. Mom, what are you? That's Mom. Derek. Myra, you had a concussion. The doctor said after we fell, I continued. Same tone, same volume. Derek said something to Jolene. I heard it clearly. He said, check the bodies. I let those words sit on the table next to the turkey and the cranberry sauce and the $50 wine. Check the bodies. That's what my son-in-law said about his wife's parents lying on the rocks. Jolene stood, halfway sat back down. Her hands were shaking. Mom, you're getting confused again. The fall, your concussion. The doctor said memory. I'm not confused, Jolene. I held her gaze. I'm the clearest I've been in my life. I reached into the grocery bag, pulled out the manila folder. The same folder Glenn had opened on our patio 6 weeks earlier. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth doesn't need volume. It needs an audience. And I had 12. I opened the folder and laid the first document on the Thanksgiving table between the gravy boat and the cranberry sauce. This is a life insurance policy. Southwestern Mutual. $2 million total. $1 million on me, $1 million on Glenn. Purchased 4 months before our hiking trip. I pointed to page 1. The applicant is listed as Jolene M. Pratt. Jolene's face went white, not red. White, the color of someone who just realized that performance is over and reality has a speaking part. I turned to page 7. These are supposed to be our signatures, but I write my capital M with 2 peaks. This one has 3. Glenn's G doesn't loop. This one does. These signatures are forged. Uncle Howard whispered, Oh, dear God. I laid down the second document, Kyle Fenton's notarized statement. This is a sworn statement from the insurance agent who processed the policy. He was paid $4,200 by Derek to bypass signature verification. 3 Venmo payments, June, July. Third document the Venmo transaction records. Derek Pratt to Kyle Fenton. Dates, amounts, timestamps. Paper doesn't lie. Paper doesn't perform. Paper just sits on a table and tells the truth. Then the last page, the transcript. I read it aloud slowly during a recorded customer service call. My daughter told the insurance company one, and I'm quoting directly, "They're old. A few more years is just nursing home money." I set the transcript down, looked at Jolene. "They're old. A few more years is just nursing home money." I repeated it once, just once, in the same calm voice. My daughter said that about her parents while planning to collect $2 million from our deaths. 12 people at the table. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The turkey was getting cold. The truth was not. Jolene broke. Not gracefully, not like the performances at the hospital or on Facebook. This was structural failure, the kind I've seen in cliff faces when the pressure exceeds what the material can hold. She started crying hard, hyperventilating, mascara running down her cheeks in 2 dark lines, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "You don't understand. You don't understand. Derek lost everything. We were going to lose the house." The bank was calling every day about, "I was trying to fix things. I was trying to save us." Fix things. I repeated her words, still calm. "By killing your parents, it wasn't supposed to. We weren't going to, actually. We just needed the money, Mom. We just needed—" Derek stood up, his chair scraped against the hardwood. "Jolene, shut up. Stop talking right now." But Jolene couldn't stop. The dam had broken. You were never there. You were always in the field, always choosing your rocks over me. You chose Alaska over my play. You chose rocks over your own daughter. I waited until she paused for breath. Then I spoke. Still the same voice, still the same volume. "I missed your play, Jolene. I missed it because 11 families were about to lose their homes to a landslide in southeast Alaska. I have regretted that decision every day for 26 years, but I have never not for 1 second of one day unplanned to hurt you." She sobbed. The ugly kind, the kind that has no script behind it. "I missed your school play. You tried to collect $2 million on my body. Those are not the same thing, Jolene." Glenn spoke for the first time at dinner. Quiet, measured. "She's not confused. I investigated this the same way I investigated 400 cases in 28 years. The evidence is complete." Derek didn't wait for the silence to settle. He grabbed his keys from the sideboard right next to where the grocery bag had been and walked toward the front door. "This is insane. We're leaving. This is a sick woman making sick accusations, and I'm not going to sit here." And he opened the door. Margaret Solis was standing on the porch, 2 investigators behind her badge, visible warrant in hand. "Derek Pratt. I'm Investigator Solis with the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of insurance fraud, forgery, and attempted secondary murder." Derek's hand was still on the doorknob. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The night air came through the door. November in Scottsdale, cool and dry, carrying the faint smell of someone's mesquite fire 2 streets over. "You can't. This is entrapment. She was wearing a wire." "No wire." "Mr. Pratt, this is Ms. Henderson's home. Arizona is a one-party consent state. She consented. The recording equipment has been active since yesterday evening. Derek was handcuffed on my front porch, under the string lights Glenn had hung last Christmas. The neighbors were watching. The same neighbors Candace had been telling that I was losing my mind. 3 of them were standing on their driveways with coffee mugs watching Derek Pratt. The charming son-in-law, the man who shook their hands too long at every block party, walked to the back of an unmarked sedan with his wrists behind his back. Margaret stepped inside. "Jolene Pratt. Same charges." "Please stand up." Jolene was still at the table, food getting cold around her, mascara streaked, shaking. She looked at me with an expression I will carry for the rest of my life. "Mommy, please don't do this." I held her gaze. I didn't look away. I didn't cry. I didn't nod. "I'm not doing this, Jolene." "You did this 4 months ago." She was escorted past Aunt Patricia, who was holding Howard's hand and crying silently, past Ben, who stood up and then sat back down because he didn't know what else to do, past the turkey and the cranberry sauce and the insurance policy still lying on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. The door closed behind Jolene. The dining room was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No silverware, no conversation, just breathing and the faint tick of the kitchen clock. Candace Pratt sat at the far end of the table. She hadn't moved since Margaret entered, her banana bread untouched on the dessert tray. Sat in front of her like evidence of a life that no longer existed. Myra. Her voice was thin, controlled. You planned this at Thanksgiving in front of everyone. You spent 6 weeks telling my friends I was losing my mind. Candace, you told Ruth Nakamura I was forgetful. You told the women at the community center I needed a guardian. You said these things in public to people I've known for 20 years. I paused in front of everyone seemed appropriate. I was protecting my son. Your son tried to kill me for $2 million. That's what you were protecting. Candace sat back slowly like a building settling after an earthquake. Still standing, but the foundation cracked. For the first time in 7 years, she had nothing to say. Then quietly, almost a whisper, I didn't know he would go that far. She stared at the table. I just wanted him to be okay. She might have been telling the truth. She might not. It didn't change anything. Margaret to Candace. Ma'am, you're not under arrest at this time, but we'll need your full cooperation with our investigation. Someone will contact you. Ruth walked across the dining room, put her arm around my shoulder, said nothing. Didn't need to. Glenn took my hand, the one that wasn't still sore from the fall. The house was quiet. The turkey was cold. The cranberry sauce was untouched. The truth was on the table, all of it. You okay? Glenn asked. No, I said, but I'm right. 3 months later, Maricopa County Superior Courtroom 4. B. Judge Helen Rivera presiding. Derek Pratt pled guilty to insurance fraud, a Class 2 felony forgery, and attempted second-degree murder. His lawyer negotiated for 8 months. The evidence was too thorough. Kyle Fenton's statement alone was 27 pages. The Venmo records, the forged signatures confirmed by Dr. Linda Vasquez, the browser searches, the customer service recording sentencing, 14 years Arizona Department of Corrections. Jolene Pratt pled guilty to insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit attempted murder. She cooperated with the prosecution, confirmed the plan, the timeline, the details. Her lawyer argued diminished capacity. The judge didn't buy it. A 4-month plan is not diminished capacity, Miss Pratt. It is deliberate. Sentencing 9 years. Kyle Fenton, guilty plea to insurance fraud and forgery, 3 years probation, insurance license permanently revoked. He cried during his statement. The judge handed him a tissue and said nothing. Candace Pratt was not charged, but her world collapsed without a courtroom. Within 2 weeks, Patricia had told the extended family everything. The women at the Scottsdale Community Center heard it from Ruth. Candace sold her house in 34 days, moved to Tucson. Nobody organized a farewell. Nobody sent flowers. The DA read Jolene's recorded words aloud during sentencing, stood at the podium, and recited them into the microphone for the record. They're old. A few more years is just nursing home money. The courtroom went quiet. The judge paused for 6 seconds before continuing. I counted. I was there front row. I didn't speak at sentencing. The judge asked if I wanted to. I shook my head. I'd said everything I needed to say at Thanksgiving. Glenn stood. 1 sentence. I spent 28 years putting strangers in prison for insurance fraud. I never imagined my last case would be my own daughter. Jolene looked at me from the defense table. I held her gaze, didn't look away, didn't cry, didn't nod. I just looked at my daughter, my only child, and let her see exactly what she'd broken. 6 months later, I changed our will. Everything, the house, the savings, the pensions, goes to the Myra L. Henderson Endowment for Field Research at Arizona State University, a geology scholarship for students who can't afford field trips. For kids who need someone to say, go study the rocks, we'll cover the cost. Glenn and I hike again. Shorter trails, easier terrain. He still complains about his knee. I still tell him to stretch more. Some things don't change. Shouldn't change. My father's canteen sits on a shelf in our hallway now, dented from the Superstition Mountains, scratched from 30 years of trails before that. Every mark a story. Dad would have known what to do. I told Glenn one evening. He did know. He taught me the rocks. The rocks saved my life. Ruth comes for coffee every Thursday at 9 o'clock. We talk about her grandchildren, about the garden, about a new trail near Fountain Hills that has good footing and cell service. We don't talk about Jolene, not because it's forbidden, because there's nothing left to say that the court record doesn't already cover. Jolene writes from prison. 1 letter a month. I read every one. Her handwriting is the same. 2 peaked M's like mine. She asks about the garden, about Glenn's wrist, about the hummingbirds. She hasn't asked for forgiveness. Maybe she knows better. I haven't replied. Maybe someday, not yet. I love my daughter. That's not a choice. Love never was, but trust is a choice. And some things once broken don't get glued back together. They get placed on a shelf and remembered for what they used to be. Last week, I hiked alone a short trail near Usury Pass October morning. The air smelled like creosote after overnight rain. The same smell from that day in the Superstitions. The same smell from when I was 9, hiking with my father. I spent 35 years studying how the earth breaks, fault lines, fractures, eruptions. What I learned on that trail in October is that families break the same way, slowly under pressure along lines nobody sees until it's too late. But here's what geology also taught me. After every eruption, the land doesn't disappear. It rebuilds different harder, and it remembers. That's my story. 1 trail, 1 fall, and a truth that weighed more than the rocks. If this story reminded you to read the fine print on any document with your name, do it today. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.